I thought I was dying when Franklin grabbed my wrist in that coffee shop, his fingers trembling like he'd been holding back tears for weeks. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows felt too bright, too cheerful for what was about to happen. "Zane, I need you to help me plan my wedding." The words hit me harder than any slap ever could, each syllable driving deeper into my chest like shards of glass. 3 months. 3 months we'd been sneaking around like teenagers. 3 months of stolen kisses in empty hallways at his father's company building. 3 months of him whispering my name like it was a prayer only he was allowed to say. 3 months of believing that maybe, just maybe, we had a future together. And now he wanted me to plan his wedding to someone else. "You're what?" I pulled my hand away so fast I knocked over the sugar dispenser, white crystals scattering across the dark wood table like snow. The coffee between us was growing cold, steam no longer rising from our untouched cups. The bustling café suddenly felt suffocating, every laugh from other tables mocking the silence that stretched between us like a chasm. Franklin's usually perfect hair was disheveled, dark strands falling across his forehead like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. His green eyes, the ones that usually sparkled when he looked at me, were now hollow with something that looked like desperation mixed with resignation. "Dad's company is falling apart, Zane. The quarterly reports came in yesterday, and we're hemorrhaging money faster than we can find investors." I stared at him, this beautiful mess of a man who'd been my secret for months. His designer shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened at the throat, and there were dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "So you're getting married? That's your solution?" The Westfield family offered to invest $20 million, but only if I marry their daughter Arya. His voice cracked on her name, and I watched him swallow hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "It's just business, Zane. A merger disguised as a marriage. You know I don't love her." The irony wasn't lost on me. Arya Westfield, the woman who would become his wife, had already contacted my event planning company. She'd specifically requested me after seeing the Morrison charity gala I'd organized last spring. The one where Franklin and I had shared our first dance when no one was looking. The one where he'd whispered in my ear that he wanted to take me home and never let me go. "So you want me to help you marry someone else because it's convenient?" The words tasted bitter on my tongue, like poison I was forcing myself to swallow. Franklin leaned forward, reaching for my hand again, but I pulled back. "You're the best event planner in the city. Everyone knows that. Rebecca specifically asked for you. And if I said no, it would raise questions. Questions I can't answer without destroying everything." I should have said no. I should have walked away right then, blocked his number, moved to another state, started over somewhere he couldn't find me. Instead, I found myself studying his face, memorizing the way his eyebrows furrowed when he was stressed, the small scar above his left eyebrow from when he fell off his bike as a kid. He'd told me that story on our second secret date, laughing as he traced the mark with his finger. "How long?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the coffee shop's ambient noise. 3 months. Relief flooded his features like I'd just thrown him a lifeline. "Give me 3 months to figure this out, and then we can be together properly. No more hiding. No more pretending. I'll find another way to save the company, I promise." 3 months to watch the man I loved marry someone else. 3 months to smile and nod while choosing flowers that would frame his face as he said "I do" to another person. 3 months to taste wedding cakes and imagine feeding him bites while knowing someone else would be sharing that sweetness. 3 months to slowly destroy myself from the inside out, one wedding detail at a time. "Franklin," I started, but he cut me off. "I know it's insane. I know it's the worst thing I could ask of you." His hand moved across the table, not quite touching mine, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "But I can't do this without you. I can't pretend to be happy about marrying someone else while you're not there. At least if you're planning it, if you're involved. It feels like you're still part of my life." The selfishness of his request should have made me angry. Instead, it broke my heart all over again. He needed me there to make his fake marriage bearable. He needed my presence to get through what was essentially prostituting himself for his family's financial security. "Fine," I whispered, hating how my voice shook, hating how easily I caved to his desperate green eyes. "But after the wedding, we're done. I won't be your dirty secret anymore. and I won't be the other man in your marriage." He reached across the table then, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in that familiar way that always made my breath catch. "You were never just a secret to me, Zane. You're everything." Liar. If I was everything, I wouldn't be sitting here agreeing to plan his wedding to another person. If I was everything, he would have found another way to save his father's company. If I was everything, he would have chosen me over money, over family expectations, over the safe and easy path. But as I looked into those desperate green eyes, I knew I was already lost. I'd plan his perfect wedding, smile through every meeting, coordinate every detail of the day he would promise to love someone else forever. I'd choose the flowers that would make Arya look beautiful walking down the aisle toward him. I'd taste test the cake they would feed each other. I'd watch him dance with his new wife while my heart shattered into a million pieces. The really pathetic part was that I would do it all because I loved him. Because even though he was breaking my heart, I couldn't bear the thought of him going through this alone. Because somewhere in my twisted masochistic mind, I believed that being part of his fake wedding was better than not being part of his life at all. "When do we start?" I asked, my voice steadier now, my professional mask sliding into place. Franklin's smile was the first genuine one I'd seen from him all afternoon. "Arya wants to meet next week. She's already chosen the venue, Rosewood Manor. The wedding is set for Christmas Eve." Christmas Eve. Of course it was. The most romantic day of the year, when everything was supposed to be magical and perfect. When fairy lights twinkled like stars and snow fell like confetti from heaven. He was going to marry someone else on the day that had always been our favorite, the day we'd spent together last year watching old movies and making love by the fireplace. Perfect. I lied. Already mentally calculating timelines and vendor availability. Christmas weddings are always beautiful. Franklin squeezed my hand one last time before letting go. "Thank you, Zane. I know this isn't fair to you." Fair. Nothing about this was fair. But life rarely was. And I'd learned long ago that sometimes love meant sacrifice. Sometimes it meant smiling while your heart broke. Sometimes it meant helping the person you loved more than anything marry someone else. The real question was whether either of us would survive it. "What about this one?" Arya held up a flowing white dress, the silk catching the boutique's warm lighting like liquid moonlight. Her smile was so genuine, so purely excited, that it made my chest physically ache. 2 weeks into wedding planning, and she'd become the cruelest kind of torture. She was actually nice. I forced my professional smile, the one I'd perfected after years of dealing with bridezillas who changed their minds 17 times about napkin colors. "It's beautiful, but maybe something with more structure. You mentioned wanting to feel confident walking down the aisle, and this style might be too flowy for that kind of presence." Arya nodded thoughtfully, holding the dress up to herself in front of the three-way mirror. "You're right. I want to feel powerful, you know? Like I'm walking into my future with purpose." If only she knew what that future actually held. If only she knew she was walking toward a man who was in love with someone else. Toward a marriage built on financial necessity rather than genuine affection. The guilt was eating me alive. But I'd committed to this charade, and Franklin was counting on me to see it through. Franklin sat in the corner of the bridal boutique, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. His long legs were crossed, expensive Italian leather shoes tapping an anxious rhythm against the plush carpet. Every few minutes, his eyes would find mine in the mirror, and I'd see the same desperate apology he'd been wearing since that day in the coffee shop. "Zane has such incredible taste," Arya laughed, spinning in front of the mirror with childlike joy. "Franklin, you're so lucky to have a friend who cares this much about getting everything perfect." Friend. The word hit me like a physical blow, but I kept smiling, kept nodding, kept playing my part in this elaborate performance. It's my job to make sure everything's perfect for your special day. Still, going above and beyond like this. Most wedding planners wouldn't spend their Saturday helping with dress shopping. She turned to Franklin, her expression warm and affectionate. "You should give him a raise or something. Better yet, you should find him a nice boyfriend, someone who appreciates how wonderful he is." Franklin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a muscle jumping near his temple. "Zane deserves the world," he said quietly, and the way he said it made my heart stutter against my ribs. Arya giggled, completely missing the weight behind his words, the way his voice dropped into that intimate register I knew so well. "You two are so sweet together. I mean, as friends. I can tell you really care about each other. It's rare to see friendships like that. If only she knew how much we cared. If only she knew that just last night, Franklin had shown up at my apartment at midnight, desperate and wild-eyed, pulling me into his arms and kissing me like the world was ending. If only she knew that we'd made love on my kitchen counter while she was probably dreaming about wedding flowers and honeymoon destinations. Try this one, I said quickly, grabbing the first dress I could reach from the nearby rack. I needed her in the fitting room, needed a moment where I couldn't see them together, couldn't pretend this whole situation was normal. As soon as the curtain closed, Franklin was beside me, his presence electric and dangerous in the small space between dress racks. Zang, don't. I stepped back, keeping my voice low, professional. Not here, not while she's trying on wedding dresses that she's going to wear to marry you. I hate this, he whispered, his hand almost touching mine, fingertips hovering millimeters away from my skin. I hate watching you pretend we're just friends. I hate that she's so nice it makes everything worse. I hate that you have to help her look beautiful for a wedding that's going to destroy both of us. His confession hung in the air between us, heavy with all the words we couldn't say, all the touches we couldn't share, all the future we couldn't have. At least not yet, maybe not ever. Then call it off, I whispered back, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Tell your father to find another way. Tell Arya the truth. Walk away. Franklin looked at me like I'd asked him to stop breathing, his green eyes wide and desperate. You know I can't do that. My family's business, all those jobs, the employees who've been with us for decades, they're all counting on this merger. If the company fails, 60 families lose their income right before Christmas. I know. I turned away, focusing on the rack of veils, trying to ignore how my hands were shaking. I know, Franklin. That's the problem. I know you're doing the right thing, and I hate that I can't hate you for it. The sound of the fitting room curtain drew our attention, and Arya emerged in a stunning A-line gown with intricate beadwork that caught the light like captured stars. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, the train spreading behind her like she was walking on clouds. This is the one, she announced, her face glowing with joy. Zane, you have to see this. I feel like a princess. I plastered on my brightest smile, preparing to tell the woman my boyfriend was going to marry how absolutely stunning she looked in her wedding dress. Just another day in paradise, I thought bitterly. You look incredible, I said, and meant it. Arya was beautiful, tall and elegant with honey blonde hair and warm brown eyes. She had the kind of natural grace that made expensive clothes look even more expensive, the kind of warmth that drew people to her like moths to flame. Franklin could do worse. Hell, if Franklin were actually straight, he probably couldn't do better. The way the beadwork catches the light is perfect for an evening ceremony, I continued, falling back into professional mode. And the train will photograph beautifully walking down the aisle at Rosewood Manor. Arya twirled again, the dress flowing around her like water. Franklin, what do you think? Franklin had gone completely still, staring at her with an expression I couldn't quite read. For a moment, I wondered if seeing her in a wedding dress had changed something for him. If maybe the reality of marrying her was starting to feel less impossible. You look beautiful, he said finally, but his voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading lines from a script. Arya's smile faltered slightly. Just beautiful? Not stunning? Not gorgeous? Not like the woman you want to spend the rest of your life with? The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. I watched Franklin struggle to find words that would satisfy her without being an outright lie. The muscle in his jaw was working overtime now, and I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. You look perfect, he said finally, like everything I never knew I was looking for. It was a politician's answer, technically true but meaningless. Arya seemed to buy it though, her smile returning full force as she turned back to the mirror. But I knew Franklin well enough to read between the lines. What he'd really meant was that she looked like everything he was supposed to want, everything society expected him to want, everything his father wanted him to want. What he'd meant was that she was perfect for the role she was being asked to play. What he hadn't said, what he couldn't say with her standing right there, was that perfection wasn't always what the heart wanted. Sometimes the heart wanted messy and complicated and impossible. Sometimes the heart wanted someone who challenged you instead of completed you. Sometimes the heart wanted someone it couldn't have. The sales associate bustled over with accessories and shoes, and I threw myself into the details, grateful for the distraction. Train length and veil placement, shoe height and jewelry choices, all the tiny decisions that would make Arya's wedding day perfect, even if it killed me to plan it. The vanilla buttercream was still sweet on my tongue when Franklin's hand found mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine in a way that felt both familiar and forbidden. I should have pulled away immediately. Instead, I let him trace patterns on my palm while his fiancée debated between raspberry and lemon filling with the enthusiasm of someone planning the happiest day of her life. The bakery was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of sugar and flour and all things sweet. Displays of elaborate wedding cakes lined the walls like edible art pieces, each one more stunning than the last. Under different circumstances, this would have been romantic, intimate, and cozy, the kind of place where couples fell more in love while planning their future together. Instead, it felt like torture. "What do you think, Zane?" Arya asked, fork halfway to her mouth, a delicate smear of lemon curd on her lips. "The lemon is amazing, but the raspberry feels more romantic, right? More Christmassy for our Christmas Eve wedding?" Romantic. I was helping plan a romantic wedding for the man whose thumb was now drawing slow circles on my wrist, hidden beneath the white tablecloth. The man who had texted me at 3 in the morning, just 2 days ago with a simple message, "I miss you." The man who was supposed to be falling in love with the beautiful woman sitting across from us. Both are beautiful choices, I managed, my voice professionally neutral despite the chaos in my chest. "What matters most is what makes you happy, what feels right for the two of you as a couple." The baker, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, beamed at my response. "That's exactly right. A wedding cake should reflect the couple's personality, their love story. It's not just dessert, it's a symbol of their sweetness together. If only this wedding reflected their actual personalities. If only there was a love story to tell." Arya was warm and bubbly, genuinely excited about every detail from the color of the napkins to the timing of the first dance. Franklin was going through the motions with practiced enthusiasm that fooled everyone except me. I knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the way he seemed to be performing happiness rather than feeling it. "Franklin's been so quiet," Arya observed, nudging his shoulder playfully with hers. "What's your favorite so far? The chocolate ganache? The red velvet? You have to have an opinion, this is your wedding too." Franklin's fingers stilled against my palm and I felt him take a measured breath. "Whatever you choose will be perfect, Arya. You have excellent taste." It was another one of his diplomatic non-answers, the kind he'd perfected in business meetings and family dinners. Safe, appropriate, completely devoid of genuine feeling. "Come on," Arya laughed, but I caught the slight edge creeping into her voice. "You have to have a preference. We're supposed to be making these decisions together. As partners." The word partners hung in the air like a challenge. Even Arya was starting to notice Franklin's emotional distance, his reluctance to engage fully in the wedding planning process. She was too kind to call it out directly, but I could see the confusion in her warm brown eyes, the way she studied his face when she thought no one was looking. Mrs. Rodriguez cleared her throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should try the chocolate ganache. It's very popular with grooms. Rich and sophisticated but not too sweet." As she bustled away to prepare another sample, Arya leaned closer to Franklin, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. "Is everything okay with you lately? You seem distant, distracted, like your mind is somewhere else." My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was sure they could hear it. This was it. This was the moment Franklin would tell her the truth, would call off this insane charade before it went any further. Maybe we could finally stop pretending, stop living this elaborate lie that was destroying all three of us in different ways. Franklin pulled his hand away from mine so quickly it left my skin feeling cold. "Just stress about work. Dad's been pushing hard to finalize all the merger details with your father. There are a lot of moving me's, a lot of pressure to get everything right." The lie came so easily, it was almost impressive. I watched Arya's face soften with understanding, watched her buy completely into his explanation. "Of course," she said gently, reaching across the table to take the hand that had been holding mine just moments before. "I'm sorry, honey. I should have realized how overwhelming this all must be. The wedding, the business merger, the pressure from both our families. It's a lot for anyone to handle. She was offering him compassion, understanding, space to be stressed and distant. She was being the perfect fiancée, supportive and patient and loving. It made everything so much worse. "We can postpone if you need more time," she continued, her thumb stroking across his knuckles in a gesture that was probably meant to be comforting but looked forced, unnatural. "The most important thing is that we're together, that we're building something real. The timeline doesn't matter as much as getting it right." The chocolate cake Mrs. Rodriguez returned with tasted like ash in my mouth. Arya was offering Franklin an out, a chance to delay, to reconsider, to find another way. And he wasn't taking it. He was choosing the merger, the money, the safe option that would save his family's business and secure both their futures. He was choosing everything except what his heart actually wanted. "No," Franklin said firmly, his business voice kicking in. "Christmas Eve is perfect. Our families are expecting it. The venue is booked. Everything's in motion. I'm fine, really. Just pre-wedding jitters." Arya smiled, visibly relieved. "Good, because I can't wait to be your wife, Franklin. I can't wait to start our life together, to build something beautiful." I excused myself to the bathroom after that, needing a moment to compose myself before I did something stupid like scream or cry or tell Arya that her future husband was in love with someone else. The bathroom was small and elegant, with soft lighting and expensive hand soap that smelled like lavender. I stared at myself in the mirror, taking in my flushed cheeks and two bright eyes. I looked like what I was, a man slowly falling apart while trying to hold it together professionally. A man watching the love of his life plan a life with someone else. When I returned to the table, they had apparently chosen the vanilla buttercream, with raspberry filling. Franklin was signing the contract while Arya chatted with Mrs. Rodriguez about delivery timing and setup requirements. Normal, boring wedding logistics that felt surreal given the circumstances. "All set," Franklin announced as I sat back down. "Mrs. Rodriguez will coordinate directly with the venue for delivery and setup on Christmas Eve morning." "Perfect," I said, making notes in my planning binder. "That gives us plenty of time for photos before the ceremony, and the cake will be fresh for the reception." We discussed a few more details: cake cutting timing, serving size, decorative elements that would complement the overall wedding theme, professional conversations that felt increasingly hollow as the afternoon wore on. As we prepared to leave, Arya threw her arms around Franklin in an enthusiastic hug. "This is really happening," she said, her voice warm with happiness. "We're really getting married." Franklin hugged her back, but over her shoulder his eyes found mine. The look he gave me was raw and desperate, full of apology and longing and something that looked like grief. I looked away first, unable to bear the weight of everything we couldn't say, everything we couldn't have. Instead, I focused on packing up my planning materials, on scheduling our next appointment, on all the professional details that kept me functional when everything else was falling apart. Just 6 more weeks until Christmas Eve. 6 more weeks in this torture. 6 more weeks until I watched Franklin marry someone else and had to figure out how to live with the aftermath. The question was whether any of us would survive it intact. The garden venue sparkled like something out of a fairy tale, thousands of tiny lights twinkling through the ancient oak trees like captured stars. I stood there imagining how perfect this would have been if Franklin and I were here for our own wedding, choosing this magical place for our own happily ever after. Instead, Arya was practically vibrating with excitement about flower arrangements, while I pretended everything about this situation was normal. "Zane, this is absolutely magical." Arya spun around in her flowing white sundress, the fabric catching the evening breeze like she was already practicing being a bride. "Franklin, can you imagine? Our first dance right here under these stars? It's like something out of a movie." Franklin managed what I recognized as his practiced business smile, the one he wore during uncomfortable board meetings. "It's beautiful, Arya. Really beautiful." Mrs. Chen, the venue coordinator, was taking detailed notes on her tablet while walking us through the space. "For your reception dinner with 50 guests, I'd suggest round tables of 8 throughout the garden area. We can position the dance floor in the center where the fountain is now, and the altar setup would be perfect against the rose trellis in the back garden." I was mentally calculating costs, timeline adjustments, vendor coordination, anything to distract myself from the vivid image of Franklin dancing with Arya under these same twinkling lights that should have been ours. But despite my professional focus, my heart physically ached watching them discuss their future together in this place that felt like it belonged to us. The venue was everything Franklin and I had ever talked about in our secret late-night conversations. Romantic but not overly formal. Elegant but still intimate, with enough natural beauty that it wouldn't need much decoration. It was perfect for the wedding we'd never have. "I need to use the restroom," Franklin announced suddenly, his voice tight. He walked away without waiting for a response, leaving Arya and me standing awkwardly with Mrs. Chen. Arya's face fell slightly, worry creeping into her warm brown eyes. "He's been so stressed lately. I don't know what to do to help him. The wedding planning should be fun, but he seems miserable through most of it." Mrs. Chen politely moved to examine the sound system setup, pretending she couldn't hear our conversation. For the first time since this whole charade started, I found myself alone with Arya, really talking to her instead of just coordinating logistics. "He's lucky to have someone who cares about him as much as you do," I said, and surprisingly I meant it. Arya really was amazing. Kind, patient, understanding, supportive. She was exactly the type of person Franklin would deserve if he were capable of being straight, if he could love her the way she deserved to be loved. "Sometimes I feel like I'm forcing him into all of this," she whispered, glancing toward where Franklin had disappeared. "Like he doesn't really want to get married but feels obligated because of the business arrangement between our families." My throat tightened. She was more perceptive than either of us had given her credit for. "What makes you feel that way?" "He's so distant during anything romantic. When we kiss, it feels like his mind is somewhere else entirely. When we talk about our future together, he gives me these generic answers that sound like he's reading from a script." Her eyes were starting to water. "Do you think he's in love with someone else?" The question hit me like a knife twisting in my chest. I stared at this beautiful, intelligent woman who deserved so much better than the lie she was living. I couldn't give her the truth that would be betraying Franklin, but I also couldn't bring myself to lie to her face when she was being so vulnerable. I stuttered, torn between loyalty and honesty. "Zane." Franklin's voice cut through the garden from the entrance. He was back, but his face was pale as death, like he'd seen a ghost during his 5-minute absence. "What happened?" I immediately rushed toward him, concerned by how shaken he looked. "Nothing," he said quickly, but I could see he was lying. His hands were trembling slightly, and there was something wild in his eyes. "Just got a phone call. We should go." The drive back to the city was tense and silent. Franklin gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, staring straight ahead like he was afraid to look at either of us. Arya sat in the passenger seat looking confused and worried, occasionally glancing at Franklin with increasing concern. I sat in the back seat, my mind racing through possibilities. What could have happened during those 5 minutes he was gone? Who could have called him that would leave him looking like his entire world had just shifted on its axis? "Franklin, honey, are you sure you're okay?" Arya asked softly as we pulled into her apartment complex. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," he lied, not meeting her eyes. "Just tired. Wedding planning is more exhausting than I expected." Arya leaned over to kiss his cheek before getting out of the car. "Call me tomorrow? We need to finalize the seating chart." "Of course," Franklin replied automatically. "Good night, Arya." As soon as she was safely inside her building, Franklin slumped against the steering wheel, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Franklin, what the hell happened back there?" I demanded, sliding into the front passenger seat. He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My father called. He was at the country club, having dinner with Arya's father and some other business associates." I waited, sensing there was more. "He overheard something. A conversation between two of the Westfield family attorneys." Franklin's hands were shaking now. "They were laughing about how easy it was going to be to absorb our company completely once the marriage goes through. They never intended for it to be a merger. It's a hostile takeover disguised as a partnership." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "They're using Arya?" "She doesn't know," Franklin said quickly. "From what Dad heard, she genuinely believes this is about bringing our families together, creating something stronger than either company could be alone." Her father has been lying to her just as much as I have. So what does this mean? Franklin looked at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Hope mixed with terror. It means that even if I go through with this wedding, even if I sacrifice everything for the business, we're going to lose it anyway. Her family is going to destroy us either way. The weight of his words settled between us. All of this suffering, all of this pretending, all of the heartbreak, it was for nothing. The business was doomed regardless of whether he married Arya or not. What are you going to do? I asked, though I thought I already knew the answer. Franklin reached across the center console and took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine like they belonged there. I'm going to tell her the truth. About the business arrangement, about what her family is really feeling, and about us. My heart stopped. Franklin, I can't do this anymore, Zane. I can't marry someone I don't love to save a business that's already doomed. I can't keep pretending that what we have doesn't matter when it's the only thing that's kept me sane through all of this. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles. I'm going to tell her tomorrow. The wedding is off. I was arranging white roses in Franklin's office when he suddenly locked the door and turned to face me, his eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying for hours. The wedding was tomorrow. I thought I was prepared for this final stretch, for watching him marry someone else and then figuring out how to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart afterward. I was completely wrong. I can't do it, he said, his voice broken and raw. Zane, I can't go through with this. The roses slipped from my hands, scattering across his mahogany desk like white confetti. Franklin, what are you? Arya deserves the truth. She deserves someone who actually loves her, who wants to build a real life with her. He moved closer, his hands shaking as he reached for me. And I deserve happiness. I deserve you. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst. Franklin, the wedding is tomorrow. The guests are flying in tonight. The vendors are all confirmed. Everything is set up. I love you, he interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of months of suppressed emotion. I love you, so much that my chest physically hurts every time I have to pretend we're just friends. I want to marry you, Zane. I want kids with you. I want to grow old with you. I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life knowing you're mine and I'm yours. Tears sprang to my eyes automatically. After months of torture, after watching him plan a life with someone else, after accepting that I would always be his secret, he was finally saying the words I'd given up hope of ever hearing. You can't say this now, I whispered, my voice shaking. Not now, not when. I already told Arya. He cut me off. The world stopped spinning. You did what? I whispered, barely able to form the words. At the venue yesterday when I went to the restroom, I called her. Franklin took a shuddering breath. I told her everything about us, about how I really feel, about how I've been lying to her by agreeing to marry her for money when my heart belongs to someone else. My legs felt weak. And what did she say? Franklin's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like a lost child. She cried, Zane. She cried so hard I thought she was going to make herself sick. But then she said she'd already suspected something. The way I look at you, the way my whole demeanor changes when you're around, the way I light up during conversations about you. He paused, running a hand through his hair. She said she'd been trying to convince herself that she was imagining things, but deep down she knew. She said no one should have to marry someone who's in love with someone else. Franklin. I reached for him but hesitated, still processing everything he was telling me. The business is going to fail, he continued, his voice gaining strength. Dad will probably disown me when he finds out I've destroyed the merger by calling off the wedding. I'm going to lose everything, the company, my family's respect, my inheritance, probably most of our social circle. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the determination mixed with fear in his green eyes. But I've already lost everything that matters by pretending you're just a friend. I've been dying inside, Zane, every fake smile, every business dinner where I have to introduce you as my wedding planner, every night I go home to my empty apartment instead of to you. It's been killing me. Franklin reached up and cupped my face with gentle hands, his thumbs brushing away tears I didn't realize had started falling. Marry me, Zane. For real this time. Not a business deal, not an arrangement to save face or money or family reputation. A real wedding. A real marriage. Real us. I stared at this man who was willing to sacrifice everything. His family, his business, his entire life as he knew it, just to be with me. This man who had finally chosen love over security, authenticity over convenience, our future over everyone else's expectations. You realize what you're giving up? I asked, needing to be sure he'd thought this through completely. Your father's company has been your whole life. Those employees you were worried about, the legacy your grandfather built, will mean nothing if I spend the rest of my life married to someone I don't love while the person I do love watches from the sideline. Franklin's voice was steady now. Sure. I'd rather be broke and happy with you than rich and miserable with anyone else. What about Arya? Is she okay? Franklin's expression softened. She's hurt, obviously. But she said something that I'll never forget. She said that she'd rather be alone than be with someone who was settling for her. Someone who was always going to be thinking about someone else. She said she deserves to be someone's first choice, not their consolation prize. That sounded exactly like something Arya would say. Even heartbroken, she was gracious and wise. She also said, Franklin continued with a small smile, that she's not surprised it's you. She said anyone with eyes could see how much we care about each other, and that she should have trusted her instincts instead of trying to convince herself that a marriage based on business arrangement could somehow become real love. So what happens now? I asked, though my heart was already racing with possibilities. Now I'm hoping the man I love will say yes when I ask him to marry me. Franklin dropped to one knee right there in his office, pulling a simple platinum band from his pocket. It's not the elaborate proposal you deserve, and it's not the ring you should have. I'll get you whatever you want later, but I can't wait another second to ask you officially. He looked up at me with those beautiful green eyes that had been haunting my dreams for months. Zane Mitchell, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for all the time I wasted being afraid? Will you let me love you the way you deserve to be loved? Openly, proudly, completely. I stared down at him, this brave, beautiful man, who had just blown up his entire life for the chance to be with me. The man who had finally chosen love over fear, who was offering me everything I'd ever wanted but been afraid to hope for. Franklin, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. You know what my answer is? I need to hear you say it, he said softly. I dropped to my knees in front of him, taking his face in my hands. Yes. Always yes. Forever yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, and then we were kissing like we'd been drowning and had finally found air, like we'd been lost in the dark and had finally found lights, like we'd been playing roles our entire lives and were finally allowed to be ourselves. When we broke apart, both of us were crying and laughing at the same time. So, I said, admiring the simple band on my finger, I guess I need to start planning a different wedding. Franklin grinned, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from him in months. Think you can handle planning your own wedding? With the groom I actually want to marry? I kissed him again, soft and sweet, and full of promise. I think I can manage that. 6 months later, I stood in the exact same garden venue where Franklin was supposed to have married Arya. Same fairy lights twinkling through the oak trees, same rose trellises creating natural archways, same magical atmosphere that had taken my breath away the first time. But this time, everything was different. This time, I was the groom. The guest list was smaller but infinitely more meaningful. Franklin's close friends who had accepted our relationship, my family who had been initially shocked, but eventually came around when they saw how happy we made each other, and surprisingly Arya herself, who sat in the front row wearing a beautiful navy dress and a genuine smile. The past months had been challenging in ways we hadn't anticipated, but also healing in ways we desperately needed. Franklin's father had indeed cut him off financially and emotionally when he discovered the cancelled wedding and the reason behind it. The family business was struggling without the Westfield investment, but Franklin had found a smaller investor who didn't require arranged marriages as part of their business agreements. Nervous? Arya whispered as I made my final adjustments to my burgundy boutonniere, the autumn colors perfectly complementing the October setting we'd chosen instead of the original Christmas Eve timeline. Terrified, I admitted honestly, my hands shaking slightly as I smoothed down my charcoal gray suit jacket. She laughed, the sound warm and free of any bitterness. Good. The best marriages are the ones that terrify you a little bit. They mean you understand how precious what you're promising really is. Over the past months, Arya and I had developed an unlikely but genuine friendship. She'd been devastated initially, of course. But as the shock wore off, she'd begun to appreciate that Franklin had been honest with her before they'd made a terrible mistake. She'd started therapy to work through her feelings about the situation, and had even begun dating someone new, a literature professor who wrote her poetry and looked at her like she hung the moon. "Thank you," I said quietly, meaning it more than she could possibly know, "for being here, for understanding, for being so gracious about everything." "Thank you for loving him enough to be honest," she replied. "And for caring about him enough to almost sacrifice your own happiness. That took courage, even if it was misguided courage." Franklin was waiting at the altar now, standing exactly where he was supposed to have stood with Arya 7 months ago. But instead of the forced smile and hidden desperation he'd worn during our wedding planning meetings, his face was radiant with joy. He kept wiping his eyes, clearly emotional about the moment we'd both dreamed of but never quite believed would happen. Our officiant was Joe, Franklin's college roommate and best friend, who had been one of the first people Franklin came out to after our engagement. Joe had been surprised but ultimately supportive, saying that he'd always sensed Franklin was holding something back in his previous relationships. "Ready?" my sister Emma asked, appearing at my elbow to walk me down the aisle. My parents had initially been concerned about the unconventional way our relationship had developed, but they'd fallen in love with Franklin almost as quickly as I had. "More than ready," I said, taking her arm and trying to calm my racing heart. The small string quartet began playing our chosen song, not the traditional wedding march, but At Last by Etta James, because it felt like we'd been waiting our entire lives for this moment. As we walked down the petal-strewn aisle, I saw Franklin's face transform, his nervous energy melting into pure love and wonder. When I reached the altar, he was crying openly, not caring who saw. "Hi," he whispered as I took his hands. "Hi yourself," I whispered back, my own tears starting to fall. Joe cleared his throat and began the ceremony with words we'd written together. Nothing traditional or formal, but honest and personal and meaningful to us. "We're here today because Franklin and Zane have decided to stop hiding their love and start celebrating it," Joe began. "They've learned that love isn't always convenient, isn't always easy, and isn't always accepted by everyone around you. But they've also learned that love is always worth fighting for." When it came time for vows, Franklin went first, his voice steady despite the tears. "Zane, I promise I will never treat you like a secret again. I promise I will be honest with you, even when honesty is difficult or inconvenience. I promise I will love you publicly, proudly, and completely every single day for the rest of our lives. I promise that you will always be my first choice, my priority, my partner in everything." My turn. I looked into those green eyes that had captivated me from the beginning and spoke from my heart. "Franklin, I promise I will stand beside you through every decision, support you in every dream, and remind you daily that choosing love over fear was the bravest thing either of us has ever done. I promise to be patient when you're learning to be open about us, and I promise to never let you forget how proud I am to be yours. Now kiss already," someone shouted from the audience, probably Tyler, Franklin's best man, who had been thoroughly entertained by our entire dramatic love story. We both laughed, foreheads touching, the tension of the formal ceremony breaking into pure joy. "Ready for this?" Franklin whispered. "For real this time," I confirmed. He kissed me under the same stars where he was originally supposed to dance with someone else. But this time everything was real. This time the promises were genuine, the love was mutual, and the future we were committing to was one we both actually wanted. The reception was small but perfect. My grandmother's vintage china, flowers from Franklin's mother's garden. She had surprised everyone by attending despite her husband's disapproval. And a cake we'd chosen together without any pretense or hidden agendas. During our first dance, Franklin held me close and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for waiting for me to be brave enough for this. Thank you for being brave enough eventually," I whispered back. The best moment came during the toasts, when Arya stood up with a champagne flute and a mischievous smile. "To Franklin and Zane," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the garden, who proved that sometimes the best weddings are the ones where the wedding planner ends up marrying the groom instead of planning his marriage to someone else. Everyone laughed, including us, because finally we weren't pretending anymore. We weren't hiding, weren't lying, weren't sacrificing our happiness for everyone else's expectations. We were just happy. Genuinely, completely, authentically happy. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Franklin and I stood together under the fairy lights, still in our wedding attire, still wearing our rings, still hardly believing this was real. No regrets? I asked, just to be sure. Franklin kissed me softly, his hands tangling in my hair, only that it took us so long to get here. Well, I said, smiling against his lips, we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. And for the first time in months, that felt like a promise instead of a dream.